Sweden, long a bastion of social democracy and liberal values, has witnessed a political earthquake. The Sweden Democrats, once a fringe party with roots in neo-Nazism, have surged in popularity. In the 2022 elections, they became the second largest party in parliament. This dramatic rise signals a profound shift in Swedish society, one that has sent shockwaves through the political establishment and beyond. To understand the current political climate in Sweden, it is essential to examine its historical context. For much of the 20th century, Sweden maintained a relatively homogeneous population. Immigration was limited, and the country's social fabric remained largely unchanged. However, the end of the Cold War and the subsequent waves of globalization brought about significant demographic shifts. Sweden, guided by its humanitarian principles, opened its doors to refugees fleeing conflicts in the Balkans, the Middle East and Africa. This influx of newcomers, while enriching Swedish society in many ways, also brought about challenges. Integration proved to be more complex and time-consuming than anticipated. The rapid pace of demographic change fueled anxieties among some segments of the population, creating fertile ground for the rise of anti-immigration sentiment. The rise of the Sweden Democrats cannot be solely attributed to cultural anxieties or anti-immigration sentiment. Economic factors have also played a significant role. Sweden, like many other developed countries, has witnessed growing income inequality and a shrinking middle class. Globalization and automation have led to job losses, particularly in the manufacturing sector, which has traditionally been a stronghold of the Social Democrats. The Swedish welfare state, once the envy of the world, has come under increasing strain. The influx of immigrants and refugees has placed a burden on social services, leading to longer waiting times and a perceived decline in the quality of care. The Sweden Democrats have exploited these anxieties, arguing that the welfare state is unsustainable in its current form and that Swedish citizens should be prioritized over newcomers. Another factor contributing to the Sweden Democrats' rise is the perception of rising crime rates and social unrest. Sweden has witnessed a number of high-profile incidents involving immigrants, including riots, gang violence, and sexual assaults. While the overall crime rate in Sweden remains relatively low compared to other countries, these incidents have received widespread media attention, fueling public anxieties about safety and security. The Sweden Democrats have capitalized on these fears, linking immigration to crime and disorder. Section 5. The Sweden Democrats' policy platform, a mixed bag. The Sweden Democrats' policy platform is a mix of right-wing populism, nationalism, and social conservatism. They advocate for stricter immigration controls, a reduction in foreign aid, and a withdrawal from the European Union. They also espouse traditional family values, oppose same-sex marriage, and call for a crackdown on what they perceive as threats to Swedish culture and identity. On economic issues, the SD present themselves as defenders of the welfare state, but only for true Swedes. They support tax cuts for low and middle-income earners, but oppose any expansion of social programs for immigrants and refugees. Their economic policies are often contradictory and lack coherence, reflecting their desire to appeal to a broad base of disaffected voters. Section 6. Sweden, in the European context, a shared predicament. Sweden is not alone in witnessing the rise of right-wing populist parties. Across Europe, similar movements have gained ground, capitalizing on anxieties about immigration, economic insecurity, and cultural change. From France's National Rally to Italy's League Party, these parties share a common disdain for the political establishment, a distrust of globalization, and a yearning for a return to a perceived golden age of national sovereignty and cultural homogeneity. The reasons for this pan-European trend are complex and multifaceted. The 2008 financial crisis and the subsequent austerity measures implemented by many European governments led to widespread economic hardship and social unrest. The influx of refugees and migrants from the Middle East and Africa further exacerbated these anxieties, fueling fears about cultural change and national identity. Section 7. The critics speak fears of xenophobia and intolerance. The Sweden Democrats' rise to prominence has been met with alarm by many Swedes who view the party's rhetoric and policies as xenophobic, intolerant and divisive. Critics point to the SD's roots in neo-Nazism and white supremacy, as well as their history of making inflammatory statements about immigrants and minorities. They argue that the SD's policies are based on fear and prejudice rather than evidence-based solutions. They fear that the party's presence in government would erode Sweden's long-standing commitment to human rights, tolerance, and social justice. They point to the experiences of other European countries where right-wing populist parties have gained power, often leading to increased discrimination, social polarization, and a weakening of democratic institutions. Section 8. Understanding the SD voter, a cry for help. While it is tempting to dismiss SD voters as simply racist or xenophobic, such generalizations are unhelpful and inaccurate. Many SD voters are ordinary Swedes who feel left behind by globalization, disillusioned with the political establishment and anxious about the future. They may not agree with all of the party's rhetoric or policies, but they see the SD as the only party willing to address their concerns. For some SD voters, their support for the party is a cry for help, a desperate attempt to shake up a system that they feel no longer works for them. They may have lost their jobs due to outsourcing or automation, struggled to make ends meet on stagnant wages, or experienced a decline in the quality of public services. Section 9. The future of Swedish politics. A nation divided. The rise of the Sweden Democrats has profoundly changed the landscape of Swedish politics. The party's presence in parliament has polarized political debate and made it more difficult to form stable governing coalitions. Traditional parties are struggling to adapt to this new reality, torn between the need to address the concerns of SD voters and their unwillingness to compromise on their core values. The future of Swedish politics remains uncertain. The SD's popularity has plateaued in recent polls, suggesting that they may have reached the limits of their support. However, their presence in parliament has normalized their extremist views and shifted the Overton window to the right. Other parties have adopted more restrictive immigration policies and tougher law and order rhetoric in an attempt to win back voters. Section 10. The broader implications, a test for European democracy. The rise of the Sweden Democrats is not an isolated incident. It is part of a broader trend across Europe and beyond, as right-wing populist parties gain ground by exploiting anxieties about immigration, economic insecurity, and cultural change. These parties pose a significant challenge to liberal democracy, as they often espouse illiberal values such as xenophobia, nationalism, and authoritarianism. Section 11. Beyond rhetoric. The need for concrete solutions. The rise of the Sweden Democrats and other right-wing populist parties is a wake-up call for liberal democracies around the world. It is a reminder that democracy is not a spectator sport, but a constant work in progress. It requires active participation, vigilance, and a willingness to defend its core values against those who seek to undermine them. Addressing the complex challenges posed by globalization, immigration, and cultural change will require more than just rhetoric. It will require concrete solutions that address the root causes of inequality, insecurity, and alienation. It will require a renewed commitment to social dialogue, economic fairness, and political reform.